The Anglicare Rental Affordability Report, Essential Workers Edition, released last week, largely went under the radar, thanks in part no doubt to the fact that it was released the same day news of Albo's multi-million dollar housing purchase broke. Like the 2024 snapshot released earlier this year, the Rental Affordability Snapshot Essential Workers Report makes for very depressing reading.
Let's go back in time.
For a family of four with two parents working full-time on the minimum wage, just over 13% of rental listings are considered affordable. For Victorian families, it's even worse. Only 3.9% of listings would be within reach. For a single parent, that plummets to 0.5%. Those on other government payments also struggle to find a place to live. Nationally, a single person on a disability or age pension could afford between 0.1 and 0.2% of listings. For an Australian on job seeker payments, there is nothing to rent considered affordable.
To be honest, many of the findings from the report released earlier this year are the same or similar as what you'll find in the Essential Workers Report, which really just highlights how hard some people are doing it at the moment.
Anglicare Australia says its annual rental affordability snapshot results are nothing short of horrifying, and many renters are having to go without essentials like food, medicine and heating to simply make ends meet.
Probably not a surprise to anyone, but it's a sad fact that rental price increases continue to outpace wage increases. In the 12 months between this year's Essential Workers Report and the last one, rents have increased at almost twice the rate of wages.
Australia's median rent has hit a record high of $627 a week. That is up 8.5% on April last year.
When it comes to rental affordability, Anglicare measures affordability based on what is really an internationally recognised standard. That is that rental costs should not be more than 30% of a household's weekly income, that is for the lowest 40% of income earners. Any household paying more than 30% of their weekly income on rent are in rental stress. In terms of the methodology behind this report, Anglicare surveyed 45,115 rental listings across Australia over the weekend of 16th to the 17th of March 2024. They took the award wages for 16 types of essential workers and measured rental affordability for a single person earning an adult full-time award wage for their occupation. There'll be people that watch this, no doubt, and dismiss it as a beat-up, I'm sure.
But I know a school teacher and they own 3 investment properties, blah, blah, blah.
I'm sure you do. Just take a breath, read the report, read the methodology, and understand the wages for the 16 essential workers are based on award rates. And wages can vary the more experience someone has. For example, a first-year teacher is unlikely to earn the same as a leading teacher with 20 years' experience. It's just how it is. What this report shows is that things are pretty grim, and for just over half the occupations on the list, things have gotten worse in the 12 months since the last report. Occupations with the most limited options include hospitality workers, cleaners and early childhood educators, with less than 1% of the 45,000 properties surveyed affordable for a single full-time worker in one of those professions. Hospitality workers had it the toughest across the country, even in Victoria, Australia's coffee capital, where only 0.6% of listings met the affordable criteria for those workers. But the report does more than just highlight some of the grim stats. It does provide some ideas for the government.
The Anglicare report notes an increase in supply is not the silver bullet to solving the housing crisis, as it wouldn't solve the issue of affordability.
But it's not really a surprise that the things that they talk about here, you've more than likely already heard a lot about them during this ongoing housing crisis. These are things that have been discussed a lot, but that the government appears unwilling to tackle on any sort of meaningful scale. The report talks about what it essentially highlights as the privatisation of public and social housing.
This is a problem that government has outsourced onto average communities. Local government, it's outsourced it onto businesses, it's outsourced it onto the workers itself.
And the fact that successive Labor and coalition governments, over what is decades now, have divested themselves from any real responsibility in favour of private market solutions. Anglicare highlight the obvious inadequacy of the Housing Australia Future Fund and call for an ambitious solution, that is to fund and build 25,000 new social homes every year for the next 2 decades. I'm sure you're asking, but how would the government fund that? Well, the report talks about the need for fair tax reform, and there's one paragraph here that really resonates with me. A government that claims to be committed to solving the housing crisis cannot be truly taken seriously until it tackles the challenge of tax reform head-on. Winding back the complex system of incentives to investors will not only reduce the pressures making the market unaffordable, but will also generate new revenue revenue that can be better invested in solutions that will make a real difference. Anytime I see a Labor politician stand up in front of the cameras and spruik what they like to sell as an ambitious housing agenda,
massive and bold things about housing.
And our agenda for housing is a broad and ambitious agenda.
If you say so.
I'm constantly wondering what's ambitious about maintaining the status quo. How can you claim to be seriously trying to solve the housing crisis when you refuse to go near some of the larger levers?
No doors have been opened here. We're not doing negative gearing. That's been made manifestly clear, and none of that has changed.
But negative gearing options are being worked up by Treasury, but you're categorically ruling out any changes, just to be clear.
I just did.
Okay.
Yeah, and not only have I done that, the Prime Minister has made that clear.
Anyway, Anglicare propose phasing out negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions over a period of time. They propose a gradual approach, and the new revenue that this would provide the government could then go toward the investment of social housing, which makes sense, doesn't it?
Sure use some around here.
The major parties, they don't want to talk about tax reform in a housing crisis, but we have to. And there are ways to sensibly start to turn this ship around. As Jackie said, you can grandfather existing arrangements. People have made investments based on the current rules. You can honour that, but going forward we can say you're only going to get capital gains tax discount if you're investing in new supply.
The report talks about real protections for renters and establishing nationally consistent rights and standards for tenants. And finally, the report talks about a guaranteed livable wage. Anglicare also put out a cost of living index, which measures the average weekly expenses on essentials for someone living on minimum wage. The most recent index found that a full-time minimum wage worker would be left with just $57 each week after covering the basic living costs. A single person on JobSeeker, that'd be $69 in the red each week.
I don't believe anyone in this house could imagine living on $40 a day. I don't think I could live on $40 a day. The evidence says anyone who tries to live on $40 a day cannot actually survive without ending up in poverty.
For so many people, a massive percentage of their weekly income is spent on just keeping their heads above water. And what the Anglicare reports show is that this situation's not improving. For a lot of people, the data in this report won't be a surprise, but I think it's still well worth a read. The timing of its release really was something though. In the space of a couple of days, we had this report released, highlighting the difficulties faced by many essential workers in just putting a roof over their head. We had the PM, who has benefited from both negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions, buy up his multi-million-dollar retirement dream home. And we've had the government once again rule out any changes to negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions, seemingly locking us into the housing status quo for another election cycle.
We're screwed, aren't we?